Hello, good afternoon, welcome back to Premier League Dad. It's the Game Week 20 review show where I'll be taking a look back at the results in this round of fixtures and how my predictions stacked up against the actual results. Let's take a look. So first up was Saturday's early kick-off, and it was one that we got right. It was Spurs 1, Newcastle 2. So we got the results and the scoreline right on that one. Solanke with a great goal, great diving header. And then the controversy, of course. Ball gets played out by the young goalkeeper, Austin. Gets Spurs in a bit of a muddle. Is it Lucas Bergvall or is it Lucas Berryvall? Because they kept calling him Lucas Berryvall on the commentary. But I'm going to call him Lucas Bergvall because that's certainly how it's spelt. Lucas Bergvall tries to play the ball out and it hits Joe Linton just on his hands are by his side, but it hits him. Falls to Bruno Guimaraes. Bruno Guimaraes passes it to Anthony Gordon. Gordon sticks it away. For the letter of the law, it isn't a handball, but I can certainly understand why Spurs would be frustrated with that one. According to the letter of the law, if Joe Linton had passed the ball to Anthony Gordon, then it would have been ruled out. But because it wasn't him, because it just hit his hand and fell to one of his teammates, that's why the goal was given. A really rough break for Spurs there, and I really do feel for Ange Postecoglou and the Spurs players at the moment, because it feels like if it can go wrong for them, then it is. They've got so many injuries. I know the fans are getting on top of him a little bit, and it's just, it feels like they need a break, Spurs. And of course, once it goes to 1-1, it feels like it's just turning into Newcastle's favour. It just felt like a goal was coming for Newcastle. And Isak, of course, getting in there. I thought it looked like a Radu Dragusin own goal at first. It was a great ball across the edge of the 6-yard box by Murphy. Isak gets in there, gets a toe on it and knocks it into the net. And overall, yeah, you've got to say a really, really important win for Newcastle if they are going to make those top 4 places as Eddie Howe and the club aspire to. They're certainly in the running, aren't they? They're certainly a contender for him. So it'd be a brave man who'd bet against Newcastle for the top 4 at the moment. Newcastle, of course, after the FA Cup games this weekend, it's a midweek Premier League fixture list next week, playing across Tuesday, Wednesday, and I think Thursday as well. And Newcastle play Wolves at St James's Park. So, again, not the easiest of fixtures. Wolves have been doing really well recently. A difficult result for them last night against Nottingham Forest. But you have to say, I think Newcastle will fancy the chances in that one. For Spurs, they've got the North London derby. It doesn't get any easier for them. They go to the Emirates to face Arsenal. You know, if Spurs were to go to the Emirates and win that, potentially kill Arsenal's title hopes, all of a sudden Ange Postecoglou's a hero again. So we'll see. It'd be really interesting to watch that one. Next up, Aston Villa against Leicester. Now, we called this one a bit of a stroll, didn't we? A bit of a breeze. We thought that Aston Villa would waltz this one. I think most people did. So I called it 3-0, and it ended up being 2-1, and a little bit closer than perhaps we gave Leicester credit for. It was 0-0 at half-time as well, and although Villa did have quite a few chances, it took Ross Barkley to score to get them ahead, and then Mavididi quickly equalised for Leicester. It was only that late goal from Bailey. 2 players who, by the way, Barkley and Bailey, both kind of on the fringes of the Villa side. So I think Unai Emery will be absolutely delighted that he's got 2 players coming from out of his squad and making such a big difference in a really important game. A game that Villa had to get 3 points in if they had, if they've got any hope of getting into those top 4, top 6 places. They really, really do need to start finding some consistency in the league, because although they're flying in Europe, the form in the league has just started to falter. So this was a big win for Villa. They've got an away trip to Everton next. Again, Goodison Park. It's an old trope, Goodison Park being a difficult place to go. That'll be a tough one for Villa as well. It really will be a tough trip. For Leicester, they've got a game coming up at home against Crystal Palace, which, on paper, Palace, difficult side, playing quite well at the moment, but that's a game that if you're Leicester and you want to stay in the Premier League, you really need to be picking up 3 points in that one. Ipswich are picking up wins at home against Chelsea. Leicester really need to be looking at the Crystal Palace and saying that's a winnable one. There's not many easy games in the Premier League, and that will be a really, really tough one for them. So next up, Bournemouth 1, Everton 0. Now, we called this one a draw beforehand. Bournemouth had a number of chances throughout the game, and I actually did a watch-along on this one, and Jordan Pickford was very, very good for Everton. Made a couple of really strong saves to keep them in the game. Jared Branthwaite made a couple of kind of last-ditch tackles to stop Bournemouth getting into key areas. It only ever looked like there was going to be one winner. I think Bournemouth will be delighted. It puts them in a really strong position in the table. They're on the cusp of Europe, and if Andoni Iraola can get them into the European places, wow, what a season that'll be. I mean, for Everton, where do you start? I really do worry for Everton this season. I was watching Jamie Carragher's analysis on Sky Sports last night where he talked about the way Everton play, their patterns of play. And although it's very easy to criticise Sean Dyche because there really isn't a lot of movement in that final third, I think it's really obvious that the quality on the ball is very, very limited from those Everton players. So I feel like to a degree he's making lemonade out of lemons. He's just working with what he's got. It's a really poor group. Now, if you're an Evertonian, of course, maybe you'll think a new manager will come in and just get an extra 10-20% out of some players, and you'd be well within your rights to think that. Since the start of last season, Everton have by far the lowest number of goals from open play of any side in the Premier League. And that was very much the tail of the tape against Bournemouth. There just weren't any real chances for Everton in the entire game. I don't believe they had a shot on target in the entire game either, which is pretty damning for Sean Dyche and for the players. And all of a sudden, Everton are now looking at potentially another new manager. The team are circling down around those relegation places. It's a really worrying time for Everton fans. They face Aston Villa at Goodison Park in midweek on the next round of Premier League fixtures. Meanwhile, Bournemouth head to Stamford Bridge, and that looks like a really enticing game, doesn't it, with Chelsea really struggling in the last few games and Bournemouth on the cusp, on the tails of Chelsea in those European places. Both sets of fixtures that I'm really looking forward to. So next up, Crystal Palace 1, Chelsea 1, and we were so close to calling a draw in this one, weren't we? We nearly said a draw, but we went with Chelsea 3-1. When I saw the notification come through that Cole Palmer had scored to put Chelsea 1-0 up, I actually thought, oh, here we go, Chelsea now will kick on and get into a rhythm. But they just didn't capitalise on it, did they? But that goal was their only shot on target for such a long time in the game, that they always just kind of left the door open for Crystal Palace. And Palace grew in confidence, as you expect them to at Selhurst Park. Grew in confidence, and they had a couple of little chances in the second half where they kind of flashed it wide of Sanchez's post. And then Cole Palmer just dallying in possession of the ball. So unlike him, isn't it? Loses possession of the ball, of course, and Palace, quick counter-attack, and Mateta with a really lovely low finish. Enzo Maresca will be furious. He'll be feeling like they've really thrown 3 points away there. Palace will be made up. It's another good point for them at home. They've got a trip to Leicester coming up next game week. Chelsea, this tricky run of fixtures doesn't get any easier. They've got Bournemouth coming to Stamford Bridge, and that one looks like a real banana skin now, doesn't it? Next up, Manchester City 4, West Ham 1. I think everyone was expecting City to carry on their winning run in this one, weren't they, to be honest? However, I've got to say, if Mohamed Kudus takes that really big opportunity in the opening moments, it's a different game, isn't it? As it was, Savinio, who had a great game, by the way, I actually thought he's been really good against Leicester and against West Ham, gave Sofal a really torrid time. And the goal, incidentally, comes down that left-hand side, doesn't it, for City? It's a bit of a fortunate one. Sofal just sticks a bit of a lazy leg out and it deflects it in past the keeper at the near post. And then once City are 1-0 up and West Ham have to come out, you're always fancying City to pick them off, aren't you? And that's exactly what happened. So at 2-0 at half-time, it was pretty much over as a contest. City added a couple more, of course, didn't they, through Haaland and Foden. And then Nicholas Füllkrug on the counter-attack gets one for West Ham as a consolation towards the end. City now, that's back-to-back wins. Leicester and West Ham, 2 games that they would have expected to win, of course. But they've now got a really difficult trip to Brentford after the FA Cup games this weekend. So that'll be one to watch. That'll be a really interesting one for City to see if they can navigate that, because that'll be a much tougher test than the previous 2. West Ham, obviously, there's now rumours about Lopetegui being let go. They've got Fulham at the London Stadium next week after they play in the FA Cup this weekend, and by that point they might well have a new manager in place. Next up was Southampton against Brentford, and We thought Brentford would be picking up their first away win of the season here, and so it turns out to be. It's a lot more emphatic than the 2-1 we thought it might be. Ivan Juric really has his work cut out, doesn't he? Southampton are going to have to do something in January, and this really reinforced that. 5-0 is a really difficult scoreline to take. The problem for Ivan Juric is that he has problems all over the pitch. The defence look like they'll concede on every attack, and in attack they don't cause the opposition enough problems. So he's going to have to get really inventive, and the club are going to have to get really inventive in the transfer market to try and find some solutions that might give Southampton a hope this season. They've got a trip to Old Trafford coming up next. Manchester United, of course, will be in a buoyant mood after the Liverpool game. Even though Southampton were bad, and they were bad, Brentford were terrific. They were really, really good, very, very clinical, and it could have been more than 5-0. Thomas Frank really relishes that underdog status, doesn't he? And they welcome a rejuvenated, confident Manchester City side next game week, so that'll be a really interesting one to watch. Next up was the late kickoff. Brighton 1, Arsenal 1. A huge game in the title race, you'd have to say. Arsenal dropping points yet again. Another game week passing us by without Arsenal regaining ground on Liverpool. It's a tough one to take for Mikel Arteta. I was actually really surprised when I saw the Arsenal team that they had no Martinelli, no Odegaard, and it just reinforced that obviously the pre-match prediction was that we thought Brighton would get a point, and I was a lot more confident when I saw that lineup. Obviously, they take the lead, of course. Wanyeri, I'm not sure what the Brighton goalkeeper's doing because it's straight at him, but it just goes straight through him and into the net. Then the big controversy in the second half, of course, the penalty decision for Saliba's headbutt. I guess we're saying a headbutt on João Pedro. Now, I was doing a watch-along on this game, and I've got to say, in real time, I didn't think it was a pen. But, to the letter of the law, I can understand why the referee gives it. And not that it particularly matters, I don't think it affects my judgment in these things, but I am a Liverpool fan. I think both players are making an honest attempt for the ball, but João Pedro does get there first. Whether Saliba gets a touch on it after that is irrelevant as far as I'm concerned, and I think as far as the rules of the game are concerned. If Saliba doesn't then headbutt João Pedro, probably keeps possession of the ball. So on that basis, I can kind of understand why the referee's given it. It's what I would call an amber decision, because if the referee gives it, VAR aren't overturning it. But if the referee doesn't give it, I also don't think VAR intervene and say that's definitely a penalty. And there are some decisions that are like that, aren't there? There are some subjective decisions that are not 100% black and white either way. And that's why we have referees at the end of the day, to make those difficult decisions. And someone's going to be upset either way. So yes, Arsenal fans, you can feel aggrieved by this one. But there's also an element of you reap what you sow. As soon as Arsenal go 1-0 up in that game, Mikel Arteta effectively closes up shop and signals no further intent of going forward. Arsenal have no further chances in that game at all, as far as I can remember. They scored and then they sat back, and Arsenal have a habit of doing this under Mikel Arteta. And if you do that away at a tough place like Brighton, you're always inviting pressure. In the end, once the penalty goes in, Arsenal might even have lost it. And I think if you're sincerely trying to win the title and assert that you are the best team in the league, you don't try and defend a 1-0 lead at Brighton. So if I'm an Arsenal fan, I'm probably more frustrated about what my own manager has done than a 50-50 decision that a referee has taken on the day. Arsenal are going to have to recover quick though. They've got the North London derby next week after a difficult FA Cup game at home to Manchester United. Brighton, on the other hand, face what looks like an increasingly difficult trip to Portman Road to face an Ipswich side that are growing in confidence. And that's who we're going to take a look at next. Fulham 2, Ipswich 2. This was the game on Sunday that had 3 penalties in it. I've got to say I was pleasantly surprised at how fast Ipswich started and how well they defended throughout the game. Obviously, I'd predicted in the pre-match that Fulham would win this one quite comfortably, 2-0. Until a really stupid decision from Sam Morsy. I actually thought Ipswich would have won that one. Kieran McKenna will just be tearing his hair out at 2 incredibly stupid decisions from players that he will rely on in Leif Davis and Sam Morsy. Once Smodics puts Ipswich 1-0 up, I think for large parts of that game they are in complete control. Fulham I can't remember it really hurting Ipswich. And all of a sudden, Harry Wilson breaks through. He's running away from goal in the penalty area. No idea why Sam Morsey decides to kick him. Absolute stupidity from a player that should know better. And once the penalty's given, Raul Jimenez steps up. Great penalty. 1-1. Ipswich, of course, immediately go up the other end, and Fulham do something stupid, and Liam Delap wins a penalty. Delap scores, puts Ipswich back in front with 10 minutes left, and you're thinking, they've done this, they've turned it round again. And once Delap scores that penalty, you're thinking, that's it, they've managed it, they've got the win again, they're back in front. Fulham they're not going to do it again. Surely they're not going to do anything stupid again. But Leif Davis hanging a lazy leg out, Raul Jimenez just falls over it, and he's giving the referee an easy decision to make. Jimenez scores again, 2-2, the tale of 3 penalties, and Ipswich come away with a point, having led for large parts of the game. You know, they'll be really disappointed with that one. They, of course, now welcome Brighton to Portman Road, and Kieran McKenna will be looking at that one as a big opportunity to get 3 points. Fulham, of course, after a really promising start to the season where they were on the cusp of the European places, they've fallen behind Newcastle, City, Aston Villa and Bournemouth, who all won this weekend. Next game week, they travel across London to West Ham, who by that point you'd imagine will have a new manager installed. Finally, Liverpool 2, Manchester United 2. I can't believe we threw this one away. First up, let's get the hard bit out of the way. Yes, I did predict Liverpool 4, Manchester United 0. I thought it would be a stroll, the same as lots of other people did, if we're being dead honest. First half was just really cagey. Liverpool were flat. They didn't show enough intensity or urgency, especially in midfield. United sat very, very deep and forced Liverpool to take a lot of risks to try and break them down. And fair play to Ruben Amorim, he had a plan and his team executed it perfectly. They waited for Liverpool's back line to push up high and they just knocked balls over the top. And the 2 times they did that, they nearly created the best chances of the half, let's be honest. Liverpool had a couple of chances in the first half, but honestly, they looked miles off it. When the second half starts, you think Arne Slot will have given them a team talk and he'll have woke them up. Trent Alexander-Arnold, oh my goodness. Horrendous performance, just switching off positionally, letting his man go. And Lisandro Martinez gets in the box and scores a terrific goal. It's a brilliant finish for a centre-back as well. And I've got to say, I was saying this in the watch-along as well, I was actually really impressed that in the 60th, 65th minute, Manchester United were really committing bodies into the box. Harry Maguire was chasing down crosses. You know, that's just something you don't see at Anfield very often. So it was a very bold approach from Ruben Amorim. And once they go 1-0 up, I'm fearing the worst at that point because I'm thinking they're just going to retreat and sit even deeper. But it didn't take long. Cody Gakpo, I think it was McAllister, broke the lines with a beautiful pass through. Gakpo cuts inside and smashes it in. It's almost a replica of the goal that Martinez scores on the other side. It's a very, very good finish from Gakpo as well. And then at 1-1 with 35 minutes to play, I'm looking at the clock and I'm thinking, right, now this can only be one result. This can only be a Liverpool win. The pressure will definitely tell now. Our tails are up. The crowd is with us. Liverpool are going to win this game. And Matthijs de Ligt puts his arm up to catch the bus, and it's a nailed-on penalty. Oh, handball! Handball! That's handball! It's handball! It's handball! That is handball! Every day of the week! It's handball! It's handball! It's a goal-bound shot, and his hand's up there. It's handball. VAR has to step in. His hand is up there. Even the most ardent, avid Manchester United fan, or Arsenal fan, or Everton fan, or any other team that may wish ill on Liverpool, even those fans would have to look at that and say, yeah, it's probably a penalty, that one. And Mo Salah steps up, makes it 2-1, and you're thinking at that point, right, Liverpool are going to kick on and make this 3 or 4 and make it a little bit more comfortable. But then United go up the other end. For some reason, Trent Alexander-Arnold is at centre-back, miles out of position, and Kanate is having to come across and cover him at right back. We can't stop the cross. Amad Diallo scores 2-2. And from that moment on, honestly, I'm just relieved that we ended the game level. Genuinely, I've seen Manchester United score last-minute winners against Liverpool lots and lots of times over the years. I remember Solskjaer doing it in the 90s in the FA Cup. I remember Rio Ferdinand's header at the Stretford end where Gary Neville runs over and celebrates in front of the Liverpool fans. I was right behind the goal in the Kop end when John O'Shea scores to make it 1-0 in the last minute. But I genuinely think if Harry Maguire sticks that away, that's the worst one of the lot. So we have to be thankful for small mercies. 2-2, it's not the end of the world. We're still top by 6 points with a game in hand. All is well. However, we do have to go to Nottingham Forest next game week, which... who wants to play Forest at the moment? For United, they'll take this as a big morale-boosting point. It was a very good away performance from them. And they now have a game against Southampton, who are effectively Premier League fodder at the moment. You know, they've got Southampton at Old Trafford, and they'll be hoping for a real confidence-boosting big win in that one to just get them back on track and get the feel-good factor coming back around Old Trafford. Finally, Wolves 0, Nottingham Forest 3. What a performance from Nottingham Forest away on the road. That was a really big 3 points for them. But again, I don't think 3-0 is necessarily reflective of the game, because Wolves had 2, maybe 3 massive chances in that first half. They really could have gone in at half-time level, but instead they went in 2-0 down. You know, Nottingham Forest have just become the experts of counter-attacking football in the Premier League. They actually have, believe it or not, the lowest possession in all of the Premier League, but they're so effective in transition. As soon as they win the ball back, they just fly forward. That's basically what happened with the first goal. Wolves lose the ball in their own half. Forest break forward, Morgan Gibbs-White with a shot from the edge of the area, slight deflection and 1-0, there you go. Slightly different for the second one, it was just a hopeful punt upfield from the goalkeeper, and for some reason, Doherty makes the cardinal sin of allowing the ball to bounce. Hudson-Odoi senses an opportunity, and he's on it like a flash, knocks it past him, gets into the box, pulls it back, and who's there? Chris Wood. 12 goals for the season now for Chris Wood, which means he scored more than Matheus Cunha, who everyone is quite rightly saying is having a terrific season, but he's also only 1 goal behind the likes of Mbeumo and Cole Palmer, who are also having phenomenal seasons, and Alexander Isak, who many would say is the best centre-forward in the Premier League at the moment. And once Forest go in at 2-0, it's a different game. It's really difficult for Wolves to get back in at that point. And the second half, Forest sit deep, limit opportunities. They do really well to restrict Wolves in that sense. And then just before the end of the game, a really quick counter-attack. Gets down the right-hand side, pulls it back, and Tayo Awoniyi off the bench, 3-0. A really lovely counter-attacking goal. And Forest fans are in dreamland. The third level on points with Arsenal. More importantly, they're 4 points ahead of Chelsea in 4th, 5 points ahead of Newcastle in 5th, 6 points ahead of City in 6th. And still, it feels like nobody is taking them seriously in those Champions League positions. But if they were to beat Liverpool at the City Ground next week, which even as a Liverpool fan I don't think is out of the question, they've already beaten Liverpool once this season, of course. That were to happen, they would have won 7 games on the spin and be 3 points off the top of the league. Who saw this coming? Got to give credit to Nuno Santo, he's done a terrific job at Forest, wherever they end up. For Wolves, I think Vitor Pereira will take heart from this one, because even though it was a 3-0 defeat, Forest are in such a good run of form at the moment, and Wolves did show quite a lot in that first half that maybe they could have got a bit more out of the game with a bit better finishing. They've got a really tough trip to Newcastle next week, so they'll be underdogs again, but I'm sure Vitor Pereira will just be heartened by another strong performance. And that's that for Game Week 20. Finally, my player of the week this week is going to go to Savinho of Manchester City. Scored the opener against Leicester, was responsible for the opener against West Ham, created a couple more as well for Haaland, and he's been absolutely crucial in helping City get back to some form. Thanks again for watching, I really appreciate it. If you like this sort of stuff, if you're a football dad like me, if you're just a football nerd like me, give us a like, give us a follow, give us a subscribe, all the good stuff. You can find me over on Twitter, on TikTok, on Twitch. All of the links are in my description below. And yeah, thanks again for watching. I'll see you on the next one.